Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. We have our third seminar in a four-part series on advances in nuclear technology. If you would like to view the previous recordings of our seminars or register for our final seminar next week, you can visit our website at energy.nd.edu. And I'd like to turn it over to our student moderator, Alvaro Carrillo.
Perfect. So good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here on this opportunity. And today we're going to be talking, I think it's one of the most, one of the most interesting topics right now in the energy field is the development of nuclear energy. And today with us, we have the opportunity to be speaking with the leadership of the Nuclear Alternative Project, which is a non-for-profit that seeks to push efforts and educating people about nuclear energy, not only to be used in Puerto Rico, but in resource-limited countries all around the world. They have a very unique approach to this. They focus a lot on community engagement and educating people. What we're doing today is a perfect example of what they do on a daily basis. And now I'd like to hand the floor to the leadership of the Nuclear Alternative Project so they can talk a little bit about what they do and why they're here and a little bit about themselves, Yeah, you guys have the floor.
Hi guys, my name is Valerie Lugo. I am the COO of the Nuclear Alternative Project. I have been with them for about 2 years, and I am super excited to be here doing this for you for the University of Notre Dame. The Nuclear Alternative Project, like very well Alvaro said, we are a nonprofit who seeks to engage with community and create awareness of this source of energy that in Puerto Rico or other islands is not very well known. Our mission is to study the alternative of the advanced reactors for Puerto Rico and any other resource limited countries by engaging with the communities and educating them in these advances, and also including the government's agencies in this. Our approach is that we literally go to the communities. We actually, for phase one, we retained the services of our company that surveyed about 3,000 people and went door to door to do this. This collaboration sets us apart and actually allows us to enter this platform via the people rather than other platforms and government or agencies or policies that are not very well received. In the Nuclear Alternative Project, our leadership is Jesus Nunez, who is our CEO. He right now works at Bechtel, and he is a structural engineer. Then there's me. I am the only one in the group that is not an engineer. My background is more in business and HR. We have Ramon Martinez, who is our Chief Nuclear Officer. He works at INPO, and he is a nuclear operations and maintenance at his job. And we also have Angel Reyes, who's not here today, but he's our Chief Technical Officer. He works at Exelon, and with us in the Nuclear Alternative Project, he was in charge of the phase one of our feasibility study as a team, as a project manager. How everything started. We are a group of Puerto Ricans born and raised in Puerto Rico and educated in Puerto Rico. One day, Eddie Guerra, Jesus Nunez, and Angel Reyes literally just had a phone conversation and decided that why was nuclear not being part of the conversation, and why was nuclear not being exposed to and brought into the mix of an alternative to power an island or give this as an additional resource to Puerto Rico. And they started doing this about 5-7 years ago. Roberto Clemente is important for us. He's a Puerto Rican baseball player, and he had this motto: if you have an opportunity to accomplish something that will make things better for someone else coming behind you and not doing that, then you're wasting your time. And we think that our efforts to engage the community and tap on those government agencies and policymakers to bring the awareness and make it known, not only for Puerto Rico, but maybe other islands and other under countries, we feel that we're paving the way for them. We are not a developer, but we are making the way easier for people to bring this idea or this solution to their countries, starting with Puerto Rico. I'm going to leave you now with Jesus.
Hi, how are you, guys? So I'm Jesus Nunez, CEO, current CEO of NAP. I'm going to talk with you about a little bit about the nuclear history in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico actually has a boiling nuclear reactor called Bonus. It was a boiling nuclear superheater. It was decommissioned by the NRC. It began construction in the 1960s. In 1964, they reached the first controlled nuclear reaction. In 1965, they achieved the full power operations. They achieved 50 megawatt thermal, 900 Fahrenheit superheated steam. And then in just 8 years after that, they shut down the plant because they start finding a lot of technical issues, and it was too costly to operate, and they just decommissioned the plant in the 1970s. Also, I want to point out that they, after decommissioning, they took out the special materials from Puerto Rico and they stored it in the mainland. And then some other low radiation materials, they just put concrete on top of them, and to lower the radiation. So there's still some materials there, but they're safe to the public. Another story of Puerto Rico is that in 1970s, they actually planned to build a reactor. They filed for construction of a 600 megawatt electric reactor in PWR in the town of Salinas, Puerto Rico. If you have seen the news recently, that town is very close to Guayanilla, and is the town that they have this plant that has suffered damage during the recent earthquakes. And that's why they amended the application in 1974, because they saw that there will be some seismic concerns, and the plant won't be as feasible as they thought. So they moved that plant to Arecibo. But then, after they completed the environmental study and all that, they withdrew the application in 1980 based on financial concerns that, not only this project, but I think a lot of projects in the US got shut down because of that. And then in 2017, this is like something hard for Puerto Ricans living in the mainland. We have our families in Puerto Rico at that time, and we were at work, and we were in constant communication with them, and all of a sudden you cannot contact anyone. So I mean, just imagine you cannot contact your families for 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, and even though that they're okay, but it's a very hard feeling. So after that, we already started doing some educational campaigns, but after that, our organization saw the need to increase our engagement with the community and government officials in Puerto Rico and the US. And after this event, we prepared an unsolicited proposal to the DOE Nuclear Energy to study the feasibility of SMRs and microreactors in Puerto Rico that we believe that could be part of the solution of the island. And this is a kind of a picture of how NAP does their community engagement, government engagement, and how we do our studies and everything else that has to be with our effort. We have volunteers from the nuclear industry. Some of them are Puerto Rican, some are not. But we have engaged with NEI, S Energy, NuScale, Westinghouse, GE Hitachi, INL National Lab, Nuclear Matters, American Nuclear Society in the US, and they have provided us the tools and information to, and they were part also of the feasibility study. Also, we have been at Puerto Rico in some town meetings. We have been in some presentations at the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez, at the University Polytechnic University in San Juan, and also we have talked with the media about it. And every time the media brings the topic and we see that there is probably some misinformation or something that they didn't understand about our organization, we jump up and we explain and we clarify the differences. Next slide, Roman. So, after we did the unsolicited proposal in 2019, around, I think it was August or October of that year, we actually received funding to do the study. And our feasibility study was going to be bigger, but it was cut because of the funding to certain topics that we felt were more important at the time. And these topics were questions from people, questions from government officials that have support our initiative to study the feasibility of these reactors in Puerto Rico, because they feel that it's a possibility, it's a solution, it's a possible solution, but they also need the proof and they also need some studies done before they can talk to the public and expose themselves, obviously, about this topic. So in this feasibility study that is free to download from our webpage to anyone, we study the market conditions in Puerto Rico, the technology assessments of some of the technologies that are coming, some of them are in the design process, some of them are already in the NRC licensing procedures. And that's the technology assessment we did. We did also a survey for public perception. We did a grid assessment because we know that Puerto Rico being an island, obviously you have an even more difficult task to try to put renewable energy as the sole nature of energy in Puerto Rico. So we did a grid assessment incorporating nuclear and the expected renewables that they're going to do in Puerto Rico. We did a legal and regulatory framework, financing, ownership, and operation mechanisms. And we also have some topic about the benefits and challenges for Puerto Rico about nuclear energy. Obviously, nuclear energy, like any other energy sources, they have benefits, they have challenges, and we provide them in our study too. And we reached the conclusion that this study indicates that the development of advanced nuclear reactors in Puerto Rico is feasible. There are other studies that have to be done, and we will talk about those in some other slides we have. And now I will leave you with Ramon he will talk about some of the key feasibility study conclusions that we reached in our study.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. And thank you, everyone. I'm Ramon Martinez, as Jesus and Valerie mentioned. I'm the Chief Nuclear Officer for NAP. And so Jesus just briefly went over the framework of the feasibility study. So I'm going to cover only a few of the key findings. The whole report is about 280 pages, and they have some executive summary and some detailed information. So if you're interested, we'll provide the link at the end of the presentation that you can access the report. One of the key findings that brings the urgency for reliable energy for Puerto Rico is the fact that there are about 13 plants currently in existence that have been there for a long time, and they're planned to be decommissioned. The plants are unreliable. Their unplanned outages are about 12 times more than the average U.S. plants, and there's a large amount of energy that is going to retire in the next 10 years. You can see from the graph on the right side, it shows the from an emission standpoint, most 98.4% of the energy that is currently being produced in Puerto Rico is from fossil fuel. So the graph on the right shows that the location by amount of CO2 that is emitted to the atmosphere from the plants currently operating in Puerto Rico. So some of the findings that was concluded is that Puerto Rico, the current energy demand is stable. That means that it doesn't change much throughout the day compared to other places. That is in part because of the tropical climate in Puerto Rico, and that requires somewhat of a base load energy source. We in our mission we don't look negatively renewables. We think is a great idea, is a great path forward. But for when we talk about energy, reliable energy for Puerto Rico for the long term, renewables certainly needs to be in the discussion, but also the need for stable base load energy is important if we are to meet our goals of reliable energy for Puerto Rico. So combination of nuclear, advanced nuclear, and renewables are a potential solution to achieve zero emission baseload power generation for the island, and that's one of the conclusions that the report communicated. One challenge currently to that idea is that the Puerto Rico Renewable Portfolio Standard requires by 2050 100% renewable, and that excludes nuclear and advanced nuclear. So only renewable solar, wind, geothermal are considered for that. And we look at what we currently are at about 1.4, 1.3% of renewable energy. That's going to be a challenge to achieve those goals. Another part of the study that was important is to understand what is the sentiment of the people living in Puerto Rico about their needs for generation, and also their sentiments towards nuclear power. So one of the interesting findings is 95% of the residents that were interviewed, they were interested in continuing to explore the option of nuclear energy for Puerto Rico. And we'll have some more discussion later on about the importance of educating the people, not just on the advantages, but also on the drawbacks and disadvantages of nuclear, but understanding the whole picture of all the technologies and the benefits and disadvantages of all benefits. We think that will give you some reasonable facts for people to support advanced nuclear for Puerto Rico. When asked about the different priorities, certainly the number one item that came up was the impact to health and the environment. Also, lower electricity bills, and also because people have fresh in their minds Hurricane Maria, but also currently since late last 2 years ago, 2019, in certain parts of the southeast and southern part of the island, they're experiencing frequent earthquakes. So they are concerned about the resistance to natural disasters for any new technology that may impact their generation. Another feasibility study finding, the study showed that advanced nuclear reactors can promote smaller and more distributed future energy plants. For example, one is called small modular reactor, has a installed capacity anywhere between 50 megawatts to 600 megawatt, and microreactors for 1 to 20 megawatts can be suitable for Puerto Rico's decentralized grid vision, in particular for mini grids. I won't get into much detail about the technology, but I'll show you on the picture on the left. That's a building of a new scale small modular reactor. As you can see, there are 6 cylinder shape. Those are the units, and that type of design. Each unit, the current value is about 77 megawatts electric that is capable of producing. So it can be adjusted based on the needs of the location. You can have from 1 unit all the way to 12 units, and they're self-contained. So that means that's a pressurized water reactor type, where you have a primary core, a primary circuit that heats up the water by nuclear reaction, and then that goes to a heat exchanger in the self-contained unit that's going to produce steam, that's going to move a turbine, that is going to move a generator and produce electrical power. Some of the advantages of that design is it's a passive system, does not require any type of emergency electrical power. If you recall, a few years ago, 2011, the Fukushima Daiichi accident in Japan, when earthquake that hit nearby the island created a tsunami 30 minutes after the earthquake that wiped out the emergency energy system. That although the reactors were shut down, they still produce decay heat, and that decay heat needs to be cooled down. And those emergency generators were flooded, unable to provide that cooling, and that's why the reactors melted. So the current plants that are operating in today's environment in the US and around the world, those designs do require emergency AC powers, require emergency planning zones. These advanced reactors, all those vulnerabilities are no longer there. So without any additional energy source, without any pumps, without any additional water, the reactor will self-cool and in its emergency cooling circuit without much intervention from operators or sources outside. On the right, you see this is an example of it's called a microreactor. Has not been approved, contrary to the new scale SMR, which get approval by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. The microreactors from the development, they're a bit more behind than the SMRs. So those are smaller, but also more mobile. There are many applications. That particular design can produce electricity and or heat up to 5 megawatts. And it's also no moving parts. They use it's called the heat tube technology, where there is no pumps, and the nuclear reaction just transferred to liquid sodium, and that's go to a secondary circuit. Very, very, very small, very simple design, and does not require a large footprint. Also, from an emergency planning perspective, it's contained to the side. There's no miles and miles where there needs to be an emergency planning zone for that type of design. And there are many others. I'm just presenting these two as examples. There are other designs from other companies, General Electric, that have somewhat similar and other different designs for advanced nuclear. Another finding was the delivery of electricity from small modular reactors and microreactors can be cost competitive when you compare it to natural gas generation, as is proposed by the current plan of their local energy utility. The cost of liquid natural gas, it's higher compared to the States because it needs to be transported. Also, it's susceptible to disruption. If you take, for example, Hurricane Maria coming in, you need a constant supply of natural gas. And if that gets disrupted, it will disrupt generation down the road. One of the benefits of advanced nuclear, I didn't mention, it's those reactors can be refueled once, and refuel, it could be 2 years for SMRs, it could be 5-10 years for microreactors. So there's no need to have a constant supply of fuel to be bring on to continue producing energy. Also, as you can see, the cost of energy in Puerto Rico is quite high, much higher than the average energy cost in the United States. So those reasons makes that type of technology a viable solution for Puerto Rico. I also wanted to talk to, so those are the key findings. Like I mentioned, there are many other details in the report, but I also want to provide a different view, some of the concerns that comes with nuclear energy. And one of those is spent nuclear fuel disposal. So once I mentioned, you don't have to refuel as often as conventional natural gas or coal, but you have to refuel every certain number of years, and that spent fuel, it's highly radioactive, so it needs to be handled with caution from a personal safety perspective, from an exposure to radiation, but also from a nuclear proliferation perspective. So that's a concern. For Puerto Rico, the technology is there where that spent fuel can be transported to the mainland, and then to be put into safe long-term storage. Other possibilities when it comes to spent nuclear fuel, other countries like France, for example, they reprocess their nuclear fuel. Right now in the US, that is not the practice. They're stored at this point on each site. But eventually they're expected to be transported to a long-term facility of storage, or a decision could be made to reprocess the fuel. So from a space consideration, if you think about all the reactors in the US that have been operated for over 40 years, and you take all their used fuel and you stack them together, it will be about a football field and about 10 yards high. So compared to the amount of coal, ash, or natural gas that you will need to produce that much energy, from a size perspective, the spent fuel seems a reasonable approach. Hurricane and earthquake resilience, those designs there of those advanced nuclear reactors, first they will do a site feasibility study to make sure that the location where they're placed are suitable for having those designs, but they're very robust. There has been even the conventional nuclear reactors in the U.S. With their tornadoes, and some of them are on the coastline. nuclear energy, it's known for his resilience to hurricanes and tornadoes. So those are concerns. For current plants, the main concern is once the reactor is shut down, what's cooling the heat that is still generated. For the advanced reactors, that is not needed, that emergency additional cooling. So that's an advantage of those newer designs. Also, high cost of new nuclear projects, that's a reality. They're quite costly, but those advanced nuclear reactor, because of the smaller, because of the use of passive system, and that brings the cost down. So from a cost perspective, you can look in the report, and it will be competitive. Not as costly as a conventional nuclear power plant. And then, common question that we ask, why do we need nuclear? We can use wind and solar, and that's true. As I said before, we're not opposed to renewable energy. I think it's great, but because of the intermittent nature of wind and solar, for Puerto Rico, there's going to be a need for some stable base load. So 100% renewable is going to create a challenge unless there is a large storage. Energy storage system that can be developed to make that a feasible solution. And the question, what if there's an accident? People remember, Chernobyl, and then Fukushima. And as I said, the current design of advanced nuclear take advantage of passive safety systems where no pumps or additional energy is needed to keep the reactor cool. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn over back to Jesus.
Thank you, Ramon. I'm going to talk about the NAP projects that we are running in parallel this year. We are we are going to submit a feasibility study proposal to the DOE in one of their FOAs. And this will be a site suitability study of the small modular reactors and microreactors. The proposal application deadline is April of this year. We have some volunteers that will provide their time and expertise as an in-kind donation to our organization. So our organization will work in this project if we get it kind of for free. We are going to provide our expertise and commitment and time. We also are working in parallel with the University of Mayagüez and the ANS, the University of Michigan, the NRC, the Polytechnic University. We are trying to bring a nuclear engineering program back to the University of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico used to have a program in the 60s, but it got shut down when everything got shut down in the island. So we think that this is an opportunity for Puerto Rico to have another economic advantage if they have this program. Even if they don't build a nuclear plant, this will provide a lot of opportunities for the students in the university. And also we collaborate with NEI, Generation Atomic, the NRC, like I said before, ANS, Nuclear Matters, and GAIN. In the study, some of the topics that we're going to touch is we have been asked a lot of questions. Obviously, our first feasibility study didn't touch everything, but obviously, when you're limited by the funding and the time, then we knew that there will be a second phase. And in this second phase, we are going to touch the topics that are kind of hot for the people, like the geology and seismology. We are going to talk about atmospheric streams and dispersion, exclusion area and low population zone, population considerations. All these things will be done based on NRC guidelines and new guidelines that are being developed for these new small modular reactors and microreactors. Next slide, please, Ramon. And if you go to our website or our Facebook page or Twitter, you will see that we are developing a lot of webinars. Some of them will be in Spanish, some of them will be in English. But our goal is we are trying to teach the people of Puerto Rico and the other limited resource countries, and even people in the mainland that connect to our webinars. We are doing them for free. Everyone can connect. And we typically do half an hour with the presenter in the topics, but a very low level discussion. We don't want this to be kind of a university class. You know, we want people to understand the basics and why nuclear could be a solution for a lot of places. And then we have half an hour questions, and people ask live questions to the presenters, and the questions that don't get to we don't get to them, we answer them in emails or through the Facebook webpage. So we invite you to our our page. We do have an event with X Energy next week, Thursday of next week. So I invite you, if you have the time, you can join in. Or if you don't have the time that Thursday, you can watch it in the Facebook page anytime you want, because they will be posted there, and they will be in the page. Another page. And then this is the study, the survey that Ramon was talking about. The NEI performed a survey of opinions towards nuclear energy between September 21 and October 1 of 2016, with a national representative of sample of 1,000 adults. And one of the main results, as you can see in this graph, is that the favorability of nuclear energy is closely related with the degree to which people feel informed about the topic. So the more people feel informed, the more they favor nuclear energy. And to be honest with you, I have seen this myself and other people in this group, with the people in Puerto Rico that we talk, that obviously they're not well informed about nuclear energy. And when we talk about it and we explain everything, the challenges and the benefits, some of them, they tell us, hey, I mean, why we don't keep educating people so we can actually look at the reliability of this option. So, and that's the job we're doing in our organization. We're trying to educate people and change the perception of the people that, you know, they don't know about nuclear, and they have an open mind about it. Obviously, you will always have a group of people that are opposed to nuclear, and you know, we still educate them, but we don't try to change their minds. We just give them the facts, and we have a professional discussions with them. Uh, Ramon, next page. And then with that, you know, we are reaching our questions. So if you guys have any questions for us, we're happy to discuss with you. And then these are our website links, and you know, you can download the feasibility study. These are the sources we got the information from.
Perfect. Thank you. That was a great presentation by all of you. Really appreciate it. To be honest, like I know the like really basic about nuclear energy, and I've been learning about recently about it, and you guys, you know, just pointing out the how feasible it is. It's really eye opening, you know, as an individual, because you guys are, you know, you're seasoned in that industry, you know what you're talking about, and but a lot of people really, nuclear energy is something we're learning about, and it's definitely very interesting. For the people in here in the event, I'm going to be making some questions to leaders of NAP. But you guys, if you're more like, if you want to ask a question, feel free to put it in the chat box or raise your hand, and we can let you know. So first of all, the first thing that came to my mind is, you know, Department of Energy, United States, they state that in the United States, around 20% of the energy that is consumed comes from nuclear energy. for me, that was a pretty big stat and looking into it. And it's been present in the United States for more than 60 years. And all of you mentioned in the presentation that in Puerto Rico, there's actually been efforts for nuclear energy, but due to multiple factors, the projects have been shut down and they've just put down on the drawer and passed the page. But something that comes to my mind, if we have it in the United States, it has such a big influence for military purposes and for consumer purposes. Why was there never such a big push in Puerto Rico? Like, if the project got shut down, why didn't there was a bigger push by the federal government or local government to explore this option that can actually be really healthy?
So as I'll start, and then you can jump in. I think a couple of reasons. One was timing. What the first, Jesus mentioned, the first plan, the bonus plan in the 60s, it was a successful project that met its mission, and it was never intended to be a long-term project. It didn't produce enough energy to be competitive for that size in the market. And then there was discussion, like it happened in the US too in the 70s. And then for nuclear, that was a bad timing from the cost of other sources. And also, in 1979, Three Mile Island event happened. And so that also put, I would say, the brakes in the investors to invest in nuclear. So I think those factors contributed to limit the potential. One aspect to the design at those in that time frame required large unit to be cost competitive because of the size of the island, the amount of energy that it was being consumed. You had to create kind of a single unit, no more than 600 megawatts, to be able to work on the grid at that point. And that's not because of the amount of manpower that requires to operate those plants. That low output, it wouldn't be economically feasible. So those factors, with advanced nuclear, they're lessened because they're designs now that are smaller and they can compensate for those issues.
I think another thing is also Puerto Rico only has fossil fuel. And to your question of why wasn't any other thing pushed to Puerto Rico or presented to Puerto Rico, if United States mainland has such a big usage of nuclear, I think generally, if you're not directly exposed to something, you don't know about it. You don't have questions. You really don't live on it. So Puerto Rico having only fossil fuel and everything working, well, when we travel to the States or other countries, we don't ask where the energy is coming. We just take it for granted. When we move, like you left the island and you're living in Indiana and you're exposed to other things. Now you know that me, for example, living in New Jersey, I have the option to connect my apartment or my house to gas, to electric, to nuclear, in Puerto Rico, you don't have that option, but it's something that you take for granted. So this is why we do these things, to educate people and tell them, listen, there's another way of doing it. They don't know about it. And 20%, it sounds a lot, but it's still in Puerto Rico, it's like, we don't know about it. They only know about The Simpsons, sadly. But then you flip it over, and it is a good thing that they don't know about it because it means that it's safer. And they don't, it's sad that they don't use that connection. But if you hear a lot of something, maybe it's because something's going on with it. But if you don't hear a lot of something, maybe it's because it's safe and it works. So it doesn't make a lot of noise. So there's always a flip side of the coin on how to present things and how to explain them to people.
Also, I can add that obviously there is a public perception. People rely a lot on the TV and radio stations, and in Puerto Rico there is not really a lot of people that know about nuclear energy. There is a minimum amount of people that have been working in the industry. And when the topic was asked before, obviously the politicians care about their careers, and if someone brings something bad about nuclear and they don't know what's going on or what happened at that time, they just put it down and they don't talk about it. So yeah, I mean, I think it has to do a lot with politics, and that's why our organization, even though we are not a political organization, but we engage with all the aspects of the topic: the politics, the communities, the need for energy, and all those things. And I think that's why we have been successful about showing up getting the study, the funding for the study, and explaining to people in Puerto Rico, even people here in the States.
Amazing. I can tell you from firsthand that's definitely true. In Puerto Rico, nuclear energy is definitely not a hot topic to say, even though we have a disaster of our government's energy department, Autoridad Energética, is a complete disaster, and it's definitely something that has to be, we got to raise more awareness about it, without a doubt. I see that Diego Silva has his hand up. Diego, if you have a question, feel free to make it.
Yeah. I just kind of wanted to ask about more in depthly about the kinds of reactors, because and maybe like find an analog, because let's say like a state like California that has earthquakes rather frequently, and you guys talked about how like more modern reactors have a lot more like, let's say, disaster proofing than older reactors. Like, what keeps a state like California from having a Fukushima type accident every 5 years? Like, because they do get a lot of earthquakes, and I do believe they have nuclear power, and they manage to run smoothly in that sense. So like, what differentiates like more recent nuclear reactors from older ones, whatever old might be in nuclear reactor terms, I guess?
Yeah, I can answer you that question. I'm a structural engineer, and I work in the nuclear industry. There are two aspects of it. One is the design of the structure itself that I have done for some for some aspects of the nuclear energy reactors, and that is not going to change. You still have to do a site suitability study. You have to go to the site, the proposed site. You have to do studies, geological studies. You go and geologists go and they do a map of the possible earthquakes that could happen there in 1,000 years. No, 100,000 years, sorry. Compared to a commercial plant, you design typically for 2,000 years seismic event. So you can see like a nuclear plant is designed to remain, what we call in structural, remain elastic. So that means that if there is an earthquake, you won't see any cracks or anything. What happened, another aspect of this is the safety of the plant, like Ramon was talking about. These old plants, if you call it, they need external water for the cooling system. So when the earthquake happens, you don't see that the structure is crumbled. You see the structure is there, but then the based on the acceleration that they will see during the earthquake, the reactor will shut down. And obviously, this reactor, when it shuts down, the energy that was generating, it won't go to zero in a minute. It needs that cooling process. And that's why Ramon was talking about that in Fukushima. What happened is the tsunami took out all the external generators, and because they didn't have external generators, then they didn't have the water coming to the cooling to cooling the reactor. So for these new reactors like the SMR from NuScale, you don't need external water because it will be passively, the energy will passively go away. You don't need that external power to bring the water from the ocean and then cool the system. I don't know if Ramon, if you have something else to add.
Yeah, not only when you mentioned about the plants in California, there are earthquakes, but those plants are designed to very robust, stringent requirements. And ever after Fukushima, all the plants in the U.S. and around the world took measures to even plan for the unthinkable. And there are additional equipment that all the U.S. plants have, and additional measures that in case of whatever worst case scenario, way beyond the design of the plant, they will maintain core cooling to prevent something from happening. So I would say, even the current old design that has some limitations, they're quite protected.
Thank you so much. That's super informative. Yeah.
Perfect. Melanie, if you have a question, feel free to make the question.
Hi. So I personally believe that this is a great initiative, especially like from what I lived back in the island. I remember just how unstable the electricity was with the grid, especially after the hurricane. What concerns me most about just the reality of the situation is that the government itself really relies on like the electric department, so like the Authority of Electrical Energy Generation. They really try to keep that part alive, even though the generators are very much antiquated and like almost trying to like break down in a way. How much of like the response from the public is needed in order for the government to take this seriously as a good alternative to what we have right now? Because I do believe that nuclear is a good way to go, but I believe that the government is trying to at least keep it from going into that direction in a certain way.
Yeah, I personally think that it will require the will of the people to pressure the elected officials. We want to get to a point where we produce safe in a way that does not harm the environment. And there are global initiatives, and we think that more pressure needs to be made, because fossil fuels, even at the pace that we're now, we're on track to cause harm that is irreparable to the environment. So public awareness on and the need to act soon is important, and public awareness of the different alternatives, including renewables, and the importance of carbon-free electricity needs to be forefront. So the more people know the urgency, the better.
Puerto Rico is already seeking alternatives. There is a new wave of bringing cleaner green energy and zero emissions to Puerto Rico. Sadly, the only energy used in Puerto Rico right now is fossil fuel, but hydro is in the mix, wind is in the mix, gas is in the mix. None of them, to what we understand, doing our feasibility study and reading what they're doing as well, because we're all on the same team. We just want to give options to Puerto Rico, not necessarily just push only for nuclear. So reading what they are coming up with and looking at our results, we all agree that only one energy is not enough for Puerto Rico. We need to have a variety, and nuclear happens to be a very steady one, clean, zero emissions, easy to resilient, and easy to connect back again in the grid after a hurricane. Has all these other features, but it's gonna take years. It's gonna take a lot of education. When we did our feasibility study, the phase one of the things that we did, like we mentioned before, we surveyed 3,000 people. If we ask people right off the bat about nuclear, their reaction is negative, completely negative. They don't understand it. They don't know about it. All they hear is accidents and problems and safety issues and concerns, and they're all valid. But when we asked questions about, do you want a system that is reliable? Do you want a system that will carry the energy load? What would you think about a system that your cost, what you're paying for energy is much lower? What would you think about, how do you feel about having this in place? All their questions, all their answers were positive. And at the end, when we say, we're talking about nuclear, they were like, oh, really? Because they don't know about it. So this is just the beginning. We're just starting to do this, and it's going to take a long time. We are not, sadly, we cannot develop this. We're just preparing the way, building the pathway for this and many more opportunities to come to the island.
Amazing.
Also,
Definitely.
Alvaro, I can add also
Of
that,
course.
you can be surprised how many politicians that know that this is a solution. It's just that they're not open to talk because obviously they feel they will have repercussions in their political careers. But some of them are starting to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like we have Carmelo Rios from the PNP in Puerto Rico, that recently talked about nuclear. He said that he believes in it, but he thinks that people need to be educated about it before we implement something. Also, the ex-governor of Puerto Rico, Garcia Padilla, also talk about it. We have Rodriguez Aguiló opening talking about it. And after we talk about in Puerto Rico about this with politicians, people, we know it's feasible and all that, but we know that people need to be educated because obviously there is opposition. There is people that believe that Puerto Rico can be running 100% renewables. That, in my personal opinion and our organization, we don't believe that. Puerto Rico is not an island that only generates electricity for turning on and off the lights. We have a lot big pharmaceutical industry. And right now, those industries, they're just putting their own cogeneration of natural gas in their plants because they cannot rely on PREPA's infrastructure. And what people don't talk when they talk 100% renewables is, even here in the States, is it's not only the output of the power, you also need to have a balance in the grid for voltage and for frequency. And those are very hard topics, and it depends on the grid. Puerto Rico being an island, you don't have you cannot buy electricity from our state and bring it if you need. So I mean, you need to have a big reserve, and the Puerto Rican grid it was successful in the past. It's just that the generation got old and the company didn't do their job of replacing it and do the maintenance. And obviously, people want to get rid of fossil fuels now, and we think it's the time for nuclear energy to come into picture, especially advanced reactors.
Definitely. Amazing. We have one last question. I know we're nearing to the end of the event at 8, so if you have to leave, don't worry about it. The last one is from Slash Shinda. If you have a quick question, you're free, and then we'll end the event.
Thank you for taking my question. Very good talk. I wanted to give you one additional bit of information. So in 2019, the nuclear energy provided about 55% of the US electricity. So you can go and check it up. I have a different question though. I'm a believer in energy mix. And I'm glad you are looking at other alternative approaches in addition to nuclear energy. Puerto Rico had become almost like an experiment in energy provisioning. And there are multiple interests that are trying to influence what the future of energy will look like in Puerto Rico. I'm looking at it from a techno-economic perspective. And I wanted to ask you, you talk about the renewables as a part of your whole mix of energy. Have you looked at, I'm sure you have, the solar insolation on Puerto Rico is pretty constant, over the whole year. Storage is an important component which is developing very significantly, and storage prices are coming down very quickly. So if you look at areas of the whole of Puerto Rico, look at how the transportation, the electricity transportation is going to be affected by having, strategically placed SMRs. Are you looking at, what is the most expeditious, economical way to provide electricity to Puerto Rico without looking at specifically, say, nuclear or any specific solution? Because there are some of these technologies are ready to implement. There are multiple, solar plants with substantial storage. When you produce them in a distributed way, you can produce a very stable grid. And you talked about, frequency and voltage, meeting the specification for frequency especially, and voltage to some extent, right? You need very good control over frequency. And for voltage, we can have about 2 to 3% fluctuation on the voltage. If you take into that as an equation, there are inverters now that are available that will do that for you. These are smart inverters. They can do substantially well. So are you in your, I quickly looked at your report. I did not see that particular aspect evaluated, but I'm sure there are others who are looking at it and you're collaborating with it. So that is my overall question. Are you looking at a techno-economically feasible roadmap for the energy provisioning, which is sustainable over long time? The Puerto Rican economy is not at a point where you can invest in these activities right away. And I'm sure there are external interests that want to put some technologies in Puerto Rico. So are you looking at all that energy mix?
We as an organization, we are just educating about what nuclear can do for Puerto Rico in the mix. We haven't done a big study like the one you're talking about. What I can tell you is, obviously, when you have solar, yes, you have a lot of solar energy in Puerto Rico. The problem is the space is one. A lot of people talk about putting it on the roofs, and I agree, completely agree, but they never talk about the grid, or they never talk about if you need more power in the future. You know what I mean? And economy is related directly to the output of energy that a country uses. And Puerto Rico, if you look at the study that PREPA did, the demand they were designing their feasibility study for 100% renewables was decreasing the output by like 1,500 or something megawatt. And our perception is that if you want a Puerto Rico that will be successful economically, you need a source of energy that is scalable. Obviously, solar energy and wind power may be an option, but because of the limited space, you will lose that stable economy. You will just design for what you have, and you have a little reserve, but you won't be able to have any industry to generate profit and increase your GDP. And that's why we're talking about nuclear, because we believe that can be a big input into the economy in Puerto Rico. But obviously those studies depend on what's the vision of the government and all that, and we can just provide an opinion about it. You know, we cannot push it politically.
Yeah, so on the mainland we are maybe spending 6 cents per kilowatt hour. You are paying 2.5 times more than that, right? So that equation probably will change immediately if you had distributed solar power with storage already, right? And then I agree with you, for economic development, that is exactly the point. For economic development of Puerto Rico, you do need very concentrated energy production setups. And nuclear is a right approach for those kind of investments. And so that's really I'm talking about, like, what is the roadmap? Are you thinking about the roadmap rather than just focusing on advocacy for one area? And that's it.
I mean, we explain our roadmap, but like I said, we cannot. We are a nonprofit organization, but we cannot change laws in Puerto Rico or go and advocate for the law change. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the people in Puerto Rico and the government, they don't need to think. The problem about the energy sector right now is people are thinking, oh yeah, we're using only 2,500 megawatt. We can replace this with this, but they're not thinking about their future. They're not thinking about, okay, let's say in the future I need extra 1,000 megawatt because my economy increased and I'm bringing all this manufacturing or higher intensity companies. Then the problem is that, you know, they won't be able to do it, you know, and they will be in a stagnant economy. And but yeah, like I said, this is our proposal to Puerto Rico, but at the end of the day, we don't have the people in Puerto Rico have the chance to say we want that. You know, I mean, they have it, not us.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for this great discussion. I appreciate everybody for sticking up until this time. Thank you for everything. If you have to leave, feel free. If anybody else has a question, you feel free to stay along. Maybe you can do the question to the panelists. But apart from that, that'll be basically the conclusion for the event. If you guys have anything to say to the people before they leave, you have the floor. Something quick. If not, that'll be everything for today, and appreciate it.
Thank you, Alvaro, for the opportunity. You guys can contact us to our social media pages. We will be happy to answer any questions. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.